Good day, everyone. Previously, we have discussed fraud. Now, we're going to discuss error. Well, misstatements in the financial statements can arise from either fraud or error. But the distinguishing factor between fraud and error is whether the underlying action that results in the misstatement of financial statements is intentional or unintentional. And when we say error, it is an unintentional or inadvertent misstatement of the financial statement. So the keywords here are it is either unintentional or inadvertent. It means that there is really no intention on the part of the person who made the error to commit such mistake. It is only by mere inadvertence or unintended act. Whereas when we say fraud, remember, it is an act that is intended by the perpetrator. There is an intention on that person to defraud another, to defraud the company, the entity, the owners of the entity, the creditors, the debtors, or all other stakeholders of the entity. So what is again the distinguishing factor between fraud and error? First, the fraud is intentional and error is unintentional. So yun nga, financial statements can be misstated. Financial statements may not be fairly presented, but not all the time that when the financial statement is not fairly presented or misstated, that the reason for it is fraud. No, sometimes it is due to error. And when you say error, then there is really no intention on the part of the person who prepared the financial statements or the person who recorded these transactions to commit such a mistake. It is only through inadvertence or in unintended act. Ano ba yun? Yung mga erroneous recording, there is transposition error or transplacement error or inadvertent double recording, inadvertent omission, yung mga yon. It can produce misstatement in the financial statements. But if there is really no intention, if it is an honest mistake, then that is considered as error. Distinguish fraud from error. As to the nature of the act, as we have already mentioned, distinguishing factor is that fraud, distinguishing factor between fraud and error is whether the underlying action that results in the misstatement of the financial statements is intentional or unintentional. That is mentioned by the Philippine Standards of Auditing, redrafted. And when it is intentional, as we have already mentioned over and over again, that is fraud. But when you say unintentional act that results in the misstatement of the financial statements, that is error. So tandaan pag intentional, fraud. There is an intent to defraud another, to commit an act in order to deceive another. That is fraud. But if there is no intention to deceive another, but it is only an honest mistake or mere inadvertence, yung hindi sinasadya, nakaligtaan mo lang, o di kaya nagkamali ka lang ng amounts or ng pag-record, that is just an error. How about as to the risk of non-detection? Risk of not detecting a material misstatement resulting from fraud is higher than the risk of not detecting one resulting from error. So ano yung mas mahirap i-detect? It is harder to detect, or the risk of non-detection is higher in fraud. Whereas, pag sinabi mong error, mas madali siyang ma-detect. Pag fraud kasi class, remember that the perpetrator would always make it to a point or to that extent na hindi siya mahuhuli or madidiscover. Of course, para saan pa na gumawa siya ng fraud na madidiscover din pala siya, di ba? Dahil ina-anticipate niya na mahuhuli siya. That is why that person made it to a point na talagang hindi siya mahuhuli. Hindi siya madaling makita. Kaya, the risk of detection is very high. Hindi siya madaling ma-discover. Pero pag error kasi, the risk of this detection is lower. So, madali siyang ma-detect. Pag ganun. Pag low ang detection risk, madali siyang ma-detect. Bakit? Kasi pag error, makikita mo yun through footing of balances, through recomputation, when the accountant recomputes, when the accountant foots or cross-foots the balances, or they reperform, or they walk through, or they perform audit or substantive procedures in audit, madidetect nila yon. Madali lang ang error kasi walang element na itinatago. Pag error kasi walang intention to hide the act. Pag error, nandyan lang plain and simple. Makikita mo lang yan agad sa financial statement or madidiscover mo agad through the performance of different auditing procedure. Pero pag fraud, there is the element of deceit. There is the element of clandestine. Kailangan na itatago kasi gusto nila na hindi sila ma-discover. Kaya mas mahirap siyang i-detect. So that is the distinguishment or the difference. If it is fraud, the risk of detection or non-detection is higher. Pero pag error, the risk of non-detection is lower. Okay. Now, we have already distinguished fraud and error. Now, let us discuss fraud triangle and fraud diamond. Nako, fraud diamond yan ha. Hindi yan fraud diamond. Okay? Fraud triangle. Fraud triangle is a visual representation or model for explaining the factors that cause someone to commit occupational fraud. What is again occupational fraud? That is internal fraud. That is the fraud that originates within the entity. It is committed by persons who had an occupation in the entity. And who are these people? The employees, the executive, the management. All those people who are employed by the entity. Kaya nga tinawag na occupational fraud. And ano itong fraud triangle nito? This visualizes or represents the factors that cause someone to commit the fraud. Ano ba ang dahilan? Bakit nagko-commit ng fraud ang mga ito? Yan si fraud triangle. Okay? Kailan ba or saan ba nag-originate ang fraud triangle na ito? The fraud triangle originated from Donald Cressy's hypothesis, which states that trusted persons become trust violators when they conceive of themselves as having a financial problem which is non-shareable, or aware this problem can be secretly resolved by violation of the position of financial trust, and are able to comply their own conduct in that situation, verbalizations which enable them to adjust their conceptions of themselves as trusted persons with their conceptions of themselves as users of the entrusted funds or property. Oh, naintindihan niyo ba? Napakahaba, ano? At English pa. Ang ibig sabihin lang niyan, class, ay the fraud triangle, the fraud triangle is the representation kung ano ba yung mga factors that affected the person or motivated the person to commit the fraud. At ang sabi niya dito, trusted persons become trust violators. Remember, di ba, yung occupational fraud, that is internal fraud. Yung mga pinagkakatiwalaan mo sa loob ng company, sila yung mga empleyado, yung mga accountable persons, they become trust violators. They violate the trust that is conveyed upon them or given unto them. Ba? When they conceive of themselves as having a financial problem which is non-shareable, ibig sabihin, may mga pagkakataon kasi, di ba, tayo as a person, as people, that we encounter problem which happens within our family, within ourselves, financially related na mga problems na hindi natin masishare sa iba. Yung bang walang ibang makakasolve ng problem mo na yan, kundi ikaw lang. Kasi hindi ka man pwedeng mangutang sa iba. O di ka wala namang taong magbibigay sa'yo lagi ng pera. So, they violate the trust that is reposed upon them because they think that they have a financial problem which cannot be shared, which the burden cannot be shared to others. And they are aware that this problem can be secretly resolved by violation of the position of financial trust. So, naisip nila, ay, baka kaya namang ma-solve itong financial problem ko secretly. Hindi naman nila alam din na may problema ko financially, hindi gagawin ko na lang ng paraan secretly. And through what? Violation of the position of financial trust. So, dun na papasok yung fraud. They have violated violated the trust that is reposed upon them. And they use their financial position, or the position of financial trust. So, they violate the trust that's reposed upon them, and then they conceive feeling nila na may problema ako, wala namang makakatulong sa akin na iba, hindi ko naman din pwede itong i-share sa iba kasi nakakahiya, o di kaya wala rin naman silang maitutulong. Naisip ko na baka pwede kong isolve ito nang walang nakakaalam. Gagamitin ko na lang yung position ko sa company ko, since they have given me, or they have made me accountable for these funds, I can use this secretly. And so they violate the trust that is reposed upon them, and they are able to apply to their own conduct in that situation verbalizations which enable them to adjust their conceptions of themselves as trusted persons. So parang nag-iiba na ngayon yung mentality nila, yung perspective nila, diba? They are able to apply to their own conduct. They are able to adjust their conceptions of themselves as trusted persons. So, inisip nila, ako naman ang accountable dito, kaya ko rin namang ibalik ito. Yun bang nagbabago na yung perspective nila as a person or users of the entrusted funds or property. Nagbabago na yung mentality nila. Inisip na, man nakakaalam, ibabalik ko naman to. Tsaka ako rin naman ang accountable dito. Alam naman di ko ibalik, babalik ko rin. Wala naman nakakaalam in the meantime. So, yan. Yan yung hypothesis ni Donald Cressy. And, let's see what is the illustration. Or here, ito, bago yung illustration. According to the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, or ACFE, the three components or elements of fraud triangle are, number 1, pressure, or perceived unshareable financial need. Remember, di ba, nabanggit kanina doon sa hypothesis? There is a pressure or perceived unshareable financial need. This is also called as the incentive or motivation. May pressure It originates within you. Parang may problema ako, hindi ko yata kayang isolve ito ng mag-isa. At saka, hindi naman nila ako matutulungan. Wala ibang makakatulong sa akin kundi ako lang. Ito yung pressure. I have to do this. This is the reason why I am doing this. Or incentive. I should do this kasi pag ginawa ko ito, may reward sa akin. Or, yan yung nagmamotivate sa kanya. That is the intention. Yung dahilan, pinakadahilan mo talaga, your motivation, your motives. This is the mentality. That is your perception. That is the thing that really motivates you. Paano ba yung i-explain yun? Yung dahilan kung bakit mo ginagawa ang bagay. Bakit mo gustong gawin. Merong bagay na nag-uudyok sa'yo. That is the pressure. Okay? It is the incentive, the motivation. And, what else? Number 2, the perceived opportunity. When you say perceived opportunity, parang pwedeng gawin to Parang walang nakabantay Hindi naman nila chine-check. Hindi kaya, saan kaya ako pwedeng kumuha ng fund? Ano kaya may mga mahina ang internal controls? Yan, perceived opportunity. Later we will discuss. And then, rationalization. When you say rationalization, that is the justification or the attitude. Rationalize. Sasabihin mo, magrarason ka ba? Anong sasabihin ni perpetrator ng fraud? Sabihin niya, kaya ako naman ginawa to kasi ganito eh. Wala kasi kaming pera nung mga panahon na yan eh. Kaya ako ginawa to kasi naiinis na ako sa kumpanya ko eh. Hindi naman ako pinapasweldo ng tama eh. Hindi kaya, tama lang yan, yung ginawa ko kasi dinadaya din nila kami sa overtime o di kaya kung ano-ano. Yan yung mga rationalization, the unjust rationalization without justifiable basis. And all of these are the components or elements of fraud. These three are the factors why do the perpetrators perform fraud or commit fraud. And class, remember, our course is not fraud. Ha? Sinasabi namin ito sa inyo in order to open your eyes to make yourself accountable in the future. We're not discussing this for the purpose of teaching you how to do it or teaching you or motivate you to how to do it. No. Ha? Remember, baka mamaya naisip nyo na, ito pala dapat kong gawin. Ito pala dapat kong bantayan. No, ha? Remember, we are Thomasians. We are ethical accountants. Aside from being an accountant, which has the duty to perform and uphold ethical values, you are Thomasians. And when you say Thomasians, you are committed in your profession, you're compassionate, and you are competent. Not only Thomasians, di ba? Meron tayong tagline na UST na, AMV pa. And AMV people, the accountants from the AMV College of Accountancy are supposed to be ethical. You're expected to be ethical. Perform high level of ethical value. Meron bang low level? Wala naman. You must perform ethical values only or show or manifest ethical values. There is no room for an ethical act such as fraud. Okay? Remind ko lang kayo kasi baka mamaya nagbabago na yung perspective nyo dyan eh. Baka mamaya puro fraud na lang ang naiisip ninyo. Okay. So let's take a look at the illustration. Now, here is the pressure or motivation or incentive. We also have the opportunity. We also have the rationalization. Let's take a look at pressure or motivation or incentive. Ito yan. Ito. Meron kasi tayong tinatawag na external pressure. We also have an internal pressure. O, dito tayo sa internal pressure muna, mas madali. Pag internal pressure, of course, the pressure originates within you. The pressure or the motivation came from you. And what are these? What are the examples? All of these are just examples, class, ha? This is not exclusive enumeration. There are other factors which you may encounter in the future. And I hope that you're not the one who are perpetrating fraud. I hope that you're the one who discovers it. Okay? But when you say internal pressure or motivation, it originates within the person of the perpetrator. What are the examples? Underperformance. Hindi na siya nagpe-perform eh. Parang natatabunan na siya sa office. Kailangan niya yatang kunwari yung mga managers ng sales. Sinasabi, dito sa purchasing department, mataas ang performance nila. Dito sa sales department, parang bumababa ang performance. Now, what are they going to do? They're going to, they might, sometimes they might misstate the financial statements. They would overstate their sales just to make it appear na performing ang department nila, mataas ang sales nila o underperformance. And what is the motivation or the incentive? There's an incentive of reward. Diba, naalala nyo last time, may mga reward. Yun yung nagmo-motivate sa kanila para mag-perform ng fraud. What else? Undercompensation. Ayan. Sasabihin, naku, di man ako pinapasweldo ng tama dito sa kumpanya ko. Mabuti na lang pag nakawan ko na lang sila. Bahala na sila. So that is the internal pressure, motivation. You see, that is very, very unethical. Diba? I do not expect that from UST students, UST AMV students. If you are my student and I will discover that in the future in you, I will disown you as my student. We do not have That kind of student in UST AMV College of Accountancy, we do not have that kind of accountant or professional. Okay? Eh, ano naman ang gagawin mo? The money class, remember, money will not equate to your integrity. Eh, aanhin mo kung mababa talaga ang sweldo. Ganun talaga, tanggapin mo. Diyan ka nag-apply eh. Ba't kasi diyan ka nag-apply? O di kaya, mag-apply ka sa iba. If you don't have good compensation, if you're undercompensated, then find another job that fits your specifications or your needs. Do not perform unethical or fraudulent act. Okay? Ano pa? Ill treatment by employer. If the employer is not treating you well, they are embarrassing you, or they give you overwork, or there are other ill treatments, and you want to avenge yourself, so that is your internal pressure or motivation, and that is wrong. Okay? Yung mga iba, ganito naman ginagawa nila sa amin, pinapahirapan nila kami lagi, parang wala silang pakialam sa amin ng mga empleyado, masyado na ang pagtuturong nila sa akin. Edi mabuti na lang na pag nakawan ko sila, bahala na sila. No, that is very unethical. Okay? The internal pressure originates within the person, but do not do that. Okay? If that happens to you, what are you going to do? Then leave the corporation or leave the entity. Find another one that treats you very well. Don't stay and compromise your integrity, because it is not worth it. It eats you up. It destroys you. So the better thing to do is leave, not perform a fraudulent act. Remember, avenge is not ours. Sabi nga sa Bible, vengeance is not ours. Hindi sa iyo ang paghihiganti. Hayaan mo sila kung they're treating you not right. Then you can also resort to legal uh, legal means. File a case or file a suit or report them to the proper authorities. But do not make yourselves like them. They're not treating you well. That's why you're going to treat them not well also. What is the difference now? What is your difference what is the difference between your employer and you? Wala na. Pareho na lang kayo. 'Di ba? You're UST AMV College of Accountancy, you're a product of UST AMV College of Accountancy, you're a Thomasian, you're that person that you want to be, then do not perform those unethical acts. How about the external pressure? Ano ba yung external na yan? Di ba kanina, it motivates within you. Or it originates within you. The pressure is in you. Yung iba naman, sa labas, external pressure or motivation. What are the examples? Number 1, indebtedness and financial difficulty. May utang kayo, may utang yung family. So may pressure, kailangan kong bayaran eh. Baka marimata yung bahay. Baka mahatak yung sasakyan ko. Kailangan kong bayaran kasi yung hospital bills ng family ko mataas na. Pag di ko to ginawa, baka hindi na makapag-aral yung anak ko. Pag di ko to ginawa, baka mawalan kami ng hanap buhay. Yun yung mga external pressure, indebtedness, financial difficulty. But remember, again, as I have said, your money or the need for money will not equate to your integrity. The integrity is one of the most valuable things on earth. It is not pecuniarily estimatable. You cannot equate that into pecuniary estimation. You cannot even pay for your integrity. Your integrity is you. So do not compromise regardless of the reason. How about family lifestyle? Yan. Uso yan. Pati yung social pressure. Family lifestyle, nasanay ka sa ganito. Nasanay ka na ang kinakain mo araw-araw ay nasanay ka ng tubig mo Starbucks. Yes, mayaman, di ba? Nasanay ka na ang tinatapakan mong basahan Louis Vuitton. Ano pa? Yung mga family lifestyle mo, pupunta ka lang ng tindahan. Kailangan nakasakay ka pa sa Mercedes mo, di ba? O di kaya Ford mo. Family lifestyle. Biglang nagkaroon ng financial disruption. Like today, we have pandemic. We have COVID-19 pandemic, and there are different financial impacts. And you're not used to it. Your lifestyle is very beautiful. very prestige. And then suddenly, there is that impact, financial impact. Naku, hindi ako sanay ng ganito. I have to keep up. I have to make for make up for the difference in our finances. O di kaya social pressure. Uy, si amiga ganito. Si amiga maganda ang sasakyan at ang mga bahay na pag-iiwanan na kami. I have to keep up. Yung mga anak ni Mamshi, ni Beshi, dito sa school nag-aaral sa UST or mas mataas pa sa UST, bakit yung mga anak ko sa ganito lang nag-aaral? Kailangan matumbasan ko sila. I have to do something kahit ano pa yan. Example, I have to use the funds of my company. Bahala na, hindi naman nila malalaman. Okay. So that is the external pressure. But plus, yung mga ganyan kasi, external pressure na yan, hindi na, nakokontrol yan eh. Always remember to live within your means. Huwag kayo na, alam nyo nang hindi kaya ng finances nyo. Hindi kaya ng family nyo. Tapos ganito pa ang gusto nyong gawin. Gusto nyo araw-araw kayong kumakain sa restaurant. Araw-araw kayong umiinom ng Starbucks nyo. Oh. Actually, wala namang masama doon. Hindi, example lang naman yun. Baka naman kayo naman masyado naman kayo sensitive dyan. What I'm saying is that if that person is not capable of spending too much because their means do not allow them to, then wag na kayo magpa-pressure sa lifestyle or sa mga taong kakilala nyo, kamag-anak o mga beshies nyo. Okay? Just live within your means. Be natural, di ba? Kung ano lang kaya, ganun lang. So that you will not be tempted to perform fraudulent act. Okay? Pag kasi na-tempt ka niyan, mahirap yun kasi. Dapat before that person is tempted, you are already conditioning yourself to become this kind of person. Dapat yung mentality nyo, fix na ito lang akong tao ang ako. Ito lang ako. Hindi ako dapat magiging, wala namang masamang mangarap, pero kung ano lang yung kaya muna at in the meantime, doon lang muna tayo. Hindi yung gagawa ka ng paraan para lang to keep up with the lifestyle or pressure, social pressure. Because that will make you unethical if you are tempted and when you have succumbed to the temptation. How about addiction to gambling or illegal drugs? Ayan din. External pressure. Di mo naman ginusto. Nasaan na-addict ka lang. Wala ka hanggang sa point na wala ka ng control. You become slaves of gambling. Slave of drugs. That becomes your pressure. Mahal-mahal kaya ng drugs. Mahal-mahal kaya magsugal. Pumunta ka sa casino, magkano buy-in mo dyan? Although, hindi pa ako nakakatry ng ganyan. Ha? Pati kayo din, ha? Walang ganyan-ganyan sa UST AMV College of Accountancy. UST na AMV pa. Bawal yan. Okay? Addiction to gambling or drugs. Yan yung mga bisyo na mahal. Ngayon, basta kahit anong bisyo, bawal talaga dapat. Hindi dapat i-control yung sarili nyo not to indulge in that. Yung mga pressure na yan, wala akong pang sugal, pre, kailangan ko magsugal. Na-addict na ako. Wala akong pang drugs, pre, kailangan ko nito. Mabaliw ako pag wala akong ganito. Alam ko na. Sige, kuha na lang ako ng funds. Diba ako, naman ako CEO naman ako, hindi naman nila malalaman kuha na lang ako ng pera, dodoktorin ko na lang yung financial statements. Ayun, that is the external pressure, but that is very unethical. Remember that, don't do that. Okay, we will disown you as our students. How about, so those are the pressures, naintindihan nyo na pag pressure, motivation, or incentive, ano ba yung nag-uudyok sa'yo na gawin itong bagay na ito? What presses you to do this act? What is that determining factor? What is in your meditation? Okay? Mga meditated acts ninyo, meditated reasons ninyo. Okay? How about opportunity? Opportunity, yan yung, pagkakataon ko nang gawin to. parang walang nakabantay. These are the facts and circumstances present in the workplace or wherever the fraudulent act was committed, which allows one person to perform the act. It is the condition of the workplace. What are the examples of this opportunity? No internal controls in place. Wala naman palang susi yung petty cash fund eh. Wala man palang vault yun eh. Di kuha lang tayo ng kuha. Petty cash fund eh. Maliliit lang naman yung value dyan eh. Kuha ako, balik ko na lang agad bukas. Hindi man nila chinecheck yan. Next month pa nila i-check yan. Kunin ko muna lahat ngayon, yung pera sa petty cash fund. Balik ko na lang pag nag-check na. No internal controls in place. That is the opportunity that is being sought by the fraudulent perpetrators. Mali yun. As a management or as an accountant, what are you going to do? Put or place internal controls. Always think of the controls that may be placed in order to avoid all of these acts, or in order to avoid the abuse from other people. Ano pa? Ineffective control. Diba? No control, no internal control. Hindi nag-check. Hindi nag-check ng funds. Walang password yung computer. Walang passcode yung vault. Walang palatandaan yung mga assets, o di kaya walang sticker or engravement, hindi naka-register yung land sa company, walang internal controls, wala talagang control na ni-set si management. Yung ineffective controls, may controls naman, pero hindi lang effective. Ano example? Yung petty cash fund. Madaling example lang kasi petty cash fund eh. Chine-check naman yung petty cash fund, pero every 6 months. Edi, may opportunity agad. 6 months pa pala hindi check eh. Edi, gagamitin muna bago maabot 6 months. Ineffective yung controls. May controls ka nga, hindi ma-effective. Di kaya may guard ka dun sa warehouse. The company has a guard in the warehouse, but that guard is always sleeping. Or the guard is only during daytime. During nighttime, when it is already dark and the perpetrators are already planning, walang guard. May guard sa umaga, walang guard sa gabi. Di ineffective ang control. Mali, diba? Mas maganda nga dapat gabi, yun yung may guard eh. Kasi daylight, broad light, makikita mo lahat ng ginagawa. Although, hindi naman lahat, diba? Almost everything you can see. Pero pag gabi, mas mahirap. Ano pa ma-ineffective control? Walang proper supervision. May supervision, pero hindi naman nagbabantay, nagsusupervise. Yung mga ganon. Ibig sabihin, may control, hindi lang effective. So, those are opportunities. What else? Improper implementation of internal controls. May internal controls nga. Maganda sana yung internal control. Hindi naman na-implement ng mabuti. O di sayang din. Parang wala din. Diba? O ano pa? Lack of monitoring. There is no monitoring. Yan yung opportunity. Walang nagsusupervise eh. Wala namang nag-question eh. O di sige, okay lang. Hindi man nila malalaman. Opportunity yun. Ano pa? No segregation of duties. Diba? We have learned already in our accounting, there must always segregation of duties. Bakit ba kasi kailangan ng segregation of duties? Para iba-iba ang gumagawa. Merong checks and balance. Pag walang segregation duties, ako lang gagawa lahat, ako lang din mag-check nun, di magandang opportunity yun to perform a fraudulent act. But when you segregate the duties, there are so many people who will review the act or review the job. So, the fraud will be diminished. The perpetration of fraud will be diminished. Mas maiiwasan ang pag-perform ng fraud sa company. So those are the opportunities. These are the facts and circumstances surrounding the workplace, and these facts and circumstances allow the perpetrator to commit the fraud. Okay? It's the opportunity. How about the rationalization? Again, when you say rationalization, this is the justification. This is the reason. Yung nagra-rationalize ka, nagra-rason ka, nagdadahilan ka. Ano ba dahilan mo? O ano ba yung mga example dito? Everybody is doing it. Nagawa naman lahat eh. Di gawin ko din. But ginagawa nga niya, hindi siya pinapagalitan. Tapos ako, papagalitan nyo. Hindi, pantay-pantay tayo dito. O, yan, yung mga rationalization ng mga mga defrauders. Very bad, di ba? I deserve more than they are paying me. Di nila pinapasweldo ng tama eh. Kailangan sweldo nila akong tama. Mas malaki pa nga deserve ko dito eh. Konti nga lang ninakaw ko eh. Diba? O yan, mga maling pag-iisip yan ha. Kung yung gagawin yan. They won't find out. Hindi man nila malalaman. Ako naman nag-check nito. Di pag nalaman nila, naka-resign na ako. Ay naku, very bad. Oh, very, very bad. What else? I will return whenever I'm capable. Iramin ko muna kasi kailangan ni Junior, kailangan ni Baby, ni Mommy, ni Daddy, ni Lola, Tito. Kailangan kailangan talaga eh. Balik ko na lang pagka pwede na. Bali lang, bali. Kahit babalik mo yan, mali yan. Do you know that the crime of theft, once you've taken, or once the person who committed the crime has already taken the property unlawfully, kahit ibalik niya yon, the crime of theft has already been committed or consummated. The return of the thing unlawfully taken will not revert or will not make the crime uncommitted. Hindi. Pag nakuha mo na, kahit ibalik mo pa yan, the crime of theft has already been consummated. So, the return of the thing unlawfully taken is immaterial, is of no moment. The crime has been committed or consummated at the moment that it was unlawfully taken. So, ito, mga rason na yan, wala yang merit. It is bereft of merit. It has no essence. I will return whenever I'm capable. Naku, mali. Very wrong, very unethical. Now, they won't lose that much naman eh. Ang dami naman nilang pera eh. Hindi man sila mauubusan eh. Okay lang yun. Tsaka, sa dami ng pera nila, malalaman pa ba nila yan? Naku, mali pa rin yun. Okay? Remember the integrity. Integrity is that person. Integrity is being tested whenever no one looks at you. That person or your character is tested when no one knows. Kaya lahat tayo, we have to uphold our integrity, our character, regardless whether somebody is looking at us or everybody is looking at us. Okay? So that is the fraud triangle. Remember, pressure, rationalization, and opportunity. Okay? Yung mga rationalization na yan, dapat malakas ang resolve nyo. You must have a strong resolve against performing the fraudulent act. Your reasons should not tempt you to perform the detestable act. Okay? You should never compromise your integrity. Okay. Ayan, motivation. Di review lang natin. Okay, let's review. When you say fraud triangle, motivation or pressure or incentive, what is this? It is the innate desire, the innate pressure, your meditation to do the fraudulent act. It is the pressure. Pressure in this case is another way of saying motivation. Ano yung nag-uudyok sa'yo sa nagawin yan? Ano yung desire mo? Innate desire. That is the motivation. Ano ang example kanina? O yung mga innate, mga internal pressure at saka external pressure. Nabanggit na natin kaya na, di ba? Yan, yung mga underperformance, undercompensation, ill treatment by employer, indebtedness, family lifestyle, social pressure, addiction to gambling, etc. and etc. Well, what are the two origins of pressure? Oh, we have already discussed, diba? We have external and internal pressure. Pressure sometimes involves personal situations that create a demand for more money. So that is internal pressure. It originates within you. It's very personal to you. Such situations might include vices like drug use or gambling, or merely life events like a spouse losing a job. So yung mga pressure na nag-originate sa inyo o di kaya sa family nyo. At other times, pressure arises from problems on the job. Unrealistic performance targets may provide the motive to perpetrate fraud. O ano ba yun? Yung mga may goal kayo sa company nyo, kailangan namin maabot to para ma-promote kami. Ayun, yung motivation for promotion. Kailangan ko to gawin para ma-promote ako. Kaya lang hindi ko kaya, pare. Kailangan ko talagang gumawa ng paraan Hindi, yaman na, sige, dadayain ko na lang para lang ma-promote. O, ayan. Internal pressure. That is very unethical. That is very wrong. Okay? Again and again, we tell you. We want to tell you that you should not do that. Okay? Kailangan sumikat kayo sa mga magagandang bagay. Hindi kayo dapat sumikat sa mga maling bagay. Kasi class, one way or another, that will be discovered. Remember yung mga accountants or mga auditors natin or the executives in a company is improving. Their technical skills or expertise is also improving. So, kung kayo, balak nyo maging fraudulent person, ay, bantay kayo. Kasi magiging magagaling ang mga auditor, mga internal, external auditor na, tiga UST din, AMV, a College of Accountancy. Mahuhuli kayo, sinasabi ko sa inyo. Mahuhuli din at mahuhuli. There is nothing that is hidden in the darkness. Nakalagay yan sa Bible. Nothing will be hidden forever. Everything will be put into light. And so, you as a person, as a professional, as an accountant, must see to it that all that you're going to do is just ethical acts. So that when time comes for you to be put into light, all that they will see is just good deeds and ethical conduct. Whereas, if you want to become like that other person, when you are put into light, what are they going to see? They will all just see your unethical conduct. And that is very bad, diba? That is not good. Okay? Ayun. So, let's go to the next slide. What else? Examples of internal pressure. Organizations in nearly every sector are cutting expenses and laying off workers. Ayun. So, na-lay off ka. Hindi kaya kailangan mag-cost cutting. Parang ngayon, di ba, during the pandemic, right now, everybody or most of the companies are already laying off or they are forcing their employees to leave. Forced leave. Kasi kailangan mag-cost cutting. The morale is down. Stock prices have been dropping. Fear is up. The combination of these conditions may create an environment ripe for fraudulent activity. So, this is the internal pressure. Now, I motivate all of you. Remember, class, na kahit magdaan ka sa ganyang bagay, dapat hindi mo i-compromise ang integrity mo. That is the very thing that should not go down with you. No? Maubusan ka na ng pera, mawalan ka na ng pera, wag mo lang isasanla o isasalang-alang ang integrity mo. That should be held up. You hold your head high and say to yourself, I can rise above all of these things. And I will always remember that my integrity should be intact no matter what. Okay? So, dapat, kahit moral ang, yung moral mo down, kahit mataas ang pangangamba mo, kailangan maging matatag ka. Huwag kang magpatalo sa mga temptasyon to perform fraudulent act. Your integrity should remain intact. Your integrity should not be compromised. Okay, how about opportunity? Now, this refers to the prevailing conditions or circumstances in the working environment. As mentioned by the International Association of Government Accountants, If one is talking about theft, there must be something to steal and a way to steal. Anything of value is something to steal. Any weakness in a system, for example, lack of oversight, is a way to steal. Of the three elements of the fraud triangle, opportunity is often hard to spot, but fairly easy to control through organizational or procedural changes. Okay. So yun nga, it is the prevailing conditions or circumstances, the facts and circumstances surrounding the working environment. Yan yung kung ano ang condition ng company, the working environment. May controls ba or wala? Kung may controls man, effective ba o hindi? Yan. And any inefficiency in the controls is a perceived opportunity. Kaya sabi nga dito, there must be something to steal in order to steal. Ba? Kung may pagnanakaw, dapat may pwedeng nakawin. Kaya may nagnakaw. Ba? Of course, di ba, given may magnanakaw. Pero kahit na may magnanakaw dyan, kung wala sanang opportunity to steal, walang mananakaw dyan. Kaya yung opportunity na yan, dapat iniingatan. Yan, mahirap yan i-determine. Sabi nga, it's hard to spot, but easy to control through what? Placing of controls. There must be controls, internal controls, in order to avoid these things to happen in the future. Oh, how about the rationalization? There are two aspects of rationalization. One, the fraudster must conclude that the gain to be realized from a fraudulent activity outweighs the possibility of detection. Oh, number one, dapat naisip niya na dapat mas malaki yung pangailangan ko kasi mas malaki. Kaya bahala na, kailangan ko talagang gawin to kasi wala akong choice . No choice ako . Ang choice ko na lang na natitira is gawin to. Kasi pag di ko ginawa to, mawawalan talaga kami. So their rationalization is that the gain would outweigh the possibility of detection. And number two, the fraudster needs to justify the fraud. There is a justification or reason behind it. Justification can be related to job dissatisfaction or perceived entitlement or a current intent to make the victim whole sometime in the future or saving one's family, possessions, or status. Rationalization is discernible by observation of the fraudster's comments or attitude. So, ano ba yung attitude na yan? Yan kasi class, ang rationalization, mentality mo lang yan . Yan yung reason mo kasi to perform an act. Ngayon, kung ang rationalization mo or perspective mo, distorted talaga, iba, wala, mahuhulog ka talaga sa bitag ng pagiging fraudulent. Kasi class, if your integrity is intact, if you have already made up or you have already a strong resolve or strong perspective against fraud, kahit ano pa ang rason na yan, hindi ka matitibag dyan. That's why, you must always check your perspective. Always check yourself. Diba? Kasi, kahit ano pa naman, lahat naman nandyan . Everywhere you go, there is dissatisfaction. Everywhere you go, there are ill treatments. Everywhere you go, the problem will always be there. The problem will not go away. One way or another, you will always encounter problems. And if you're not strong enough to resolve to yourself that you are not going to do any unethical act, despite the factors that you're facing, wala ka talaga. Mahuhulog ka dyan. That's why you must be resolved. You must have the strong resolve that whatever you're facing, you will not compromise your integrity. Kahit ano pang rason. Kasi class, ang daming rason . Maraming rason. Kahit saan, pwede kang makahugot ng rason. Sasabihin mo lang, kailangan ko . Kailangan ng family ko . Kaya dapat matibay ang character mo. Matibay ang integrity mo. Okay? Your attitude. Your attitude against fraud is very important. Ang fear mo, hindi dapat yung, ayaw kong gawin kasi baka mahuli ako. Hindi. Dapat bago ka pa mahuli, ikaw mismo sa sarili mo, ayaw mo dapat gawin. Okay? Hindi din maganda yung reason na, hindi ko gagawin kasi baka mahuli ako . Eh, kung hindi ka din mahuli, gagawin mo pala. Diba? Kung hindi ka pala mahuhuli, kung walang mahuhuli sa'yo, gagawin mo. No, mali yung ganong reason eh. Kasi nandun ka na sa end eh. Dapat ikaw mismo at the very bottom of your heart, you've already resolved to yourself that you detest the fraudulent act and you are not going to do that. And whatever will be the reason. Okay? So, rationalization, tayo as UST AMV College of Accountancy professionals, accountants, we should not rationalize over the unethical act or fraudulent act. Kahit malaki pa ang gain mo, kahit malaki pa ang makukuha mo, makukulimbat mo, kahit na mahuli ka in the future, ay, you should not justify. There is nothing good with doing fraudulent act because even if no one will see you or if no one will detect the thing that you have done, remember that we have a God in heaven who sees all the things that you do in secret. Yun ang katakutan nyo. Kung andun na kayo sa point na, bahala sila dyan. Kahit mahuli nila ako, wala akong pakialam sa kanila. Kung ganun na talaga ang attitude mo, matakot ka sa God mo na nakikita ka sa lahat ng ginagawa mo. Diba? We are Thomasians. We are God-fearing people. Diba? We recognize the sovereignty of God. And that God, our God, sees us in secret. He sees all the things that we do. He sees all the things that we put in our mind, in our hearts, in our soul. And if He sees that you're performing fraudulent act, you're even thinking of it, trying to contemplate for it, mahiya ka naman, diba? Mahiya ka naman kay Lord. Nakikita ka niya. So, there is no room for us to rationalize again and again fraud. Okay? Ano naman itong fraud diamond? O, tandaan nyo class ha. What is the fraud triangle? There is what we call pressure, motivation, or incentive. Number 2, we have opportunity. Number 3, rationalization. Ano bang mnemonics natin dun? POR. P-O-R. Pressure, opportunity, and rationalization. Remember, pagka fraudulent ang tao, magiging poor siya. Poor. Poor ang kanyang ethical standards. Poor ang kanyang ethical values. Poor ba? Yung ano ba? Yung hindi rich, poor. So, poor. Tandaan niyo yun, ha? Pangit. Ibig sabihin, pangit ang ethical value. Pangit ang ethical standards pag naging fraudulent. Okay, what about diamond? Diba yung triangle class? 3 lang yan. Triangle nga 3 sides. When you say diamond, 4 sides yan. 4, ibig sabihin, 4 ang factors or 4 ang elements that motivates another to perform fraud. And what is the 4th element? Aside from P-O-R, the pressure, opportunity, and rationalization. What's the 4th? That is the capacity. Sino ang nakaisip niyan? Si Wolf, Hermanson, and Ruan Kel. Ang hirap. Hindi ko alam kung paano i-pronounce to, but Ruan Kel. Yes. Wolf, Hermanson, and Ruan Kel argue that although perceived pressures or incentives may exist along with opportunities and rationalizations, fraud is not possible unless the 4th element is present. And what is that? The capacity. In other words, potential actors must have the skills and ability to actually commit fraud. In addition, according to Kasem and Higson and Sorunk and Abayomi, many frauds will not occur without the right people with the ability to commit fraud. In other words, potential fraud perpetrators must have the skill and ability to commit fraud. So, capacity, importante daw yun. O, fraudulent na yung isip mo. Meron kang rason. Meron ding opportunity. Wala ka naman daw kakayahan to commit the fraud. Wala kang occupation or wala kang sufficient influence to commit the fraud. E di wala ka din. So, that is capacity. Yung capacity or the ability to commit fraud. Yan yung sinasabi nila, the fourth element. So, yan. Itsura. We have pressure, opportunity, rationalization, and capability or capacity. But, it can be argued, it is arguable that traits are components of pressure and that abilities are opportunity factors. So, di ba, pag sinabi mong capacity, you have the trait and the ability to perform the fraud. Yung position mo, hindi kayo yung kakayahan mo, yung nag enable sa'yo to commit fraud. But people are arguing that it is also a component of pressure and opportunity. So, sinasabi niya, kasama naman sa pressure at sa opportunity. Kaya, fraud triangle pa rin tayo. Ayun. So, it can be argued. Well, but we others, the scholars, also recognize the fraud diamond. And the fourth element, again, is capacity. Okay. So, let's go to the 2020 Report on the Nations by the Association of Fraud Examiners. So, ACFE. Ito kasi, yung ACFE na yan, that is an international organization of fraud examiners. Sa Philippines, I think there is already an ACFE in the Philippines. The fraud examiners, and that is another profession. If you want, I think you have to study different modules prior to getting a certification or examination. And when you pass that, you will have an international affiliate or international association. And that is the ACFE, Association of Fraud Examiners. And they are specialized in detecting fraud. So the 2020 edition of the Report to Nations, our 11th study of the impact occupational fraud has on organizations throughout the world. Ano ba yung 2020? 2020. Nahirap pa. 2020 Report on the Nations. Ano ba ito? It is the study of the impact of occupational fraud. O, occupational fraud lang pinag-uusapan dito, class, ha? Or what? What do you call occupational fraud? That is internal fraud. So, ang ginawa nila, they performed a study involving the organizations throughout the world. 11th study. And the complete classification of occupational fraud, frequently referred to as the fraud tree, is shown below. At naalala nyo pa ba, class, yung types of occupational fraud? Tatlo yun, di ba? We have, number 1, asset misappropriation. Number 2, fraudulent financial statements. Number 3, corruption. Yan yung fraud tree. Tignan natin kung ano yung nakalagay sa report nila. Ayan, medyo maliit lang siya. Pero, isa-isahin natin mamaya. So, sana nakikita nyo, di ba? Ano nakalagay? Galing to class sa 2020 Report to the Nations, ha? Hindi ako gumawa nito. Ito ay kinuha ko lang sa ACFE. We want to discuss their illustration. So, this is not mine, ha? Occupational Fraud and Abuse Classification System, the Fraud 3. The Fraud 3. Okay. Corruption, asset misappropriation, and financial statement fraud. When you say corruption, we have already discussed, there is conflicts of interest, bribery, illegal gratuities, and economic extortion. In the Philippines class, I hope we can have a special lecture on this. There is what we call Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act. This is the law, special law, which provides for the penalties on different acts considered as graft and corrupt practices. So this is the corruption in the government or public offices. But of course, the persons who commit corruption, according to the Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act, are not only limited to public officers. There are also private persons who commits corruption in conspiracy with the public officers. And what are the acts? Sometimes these are bribery, economic extortion, illegal gratuities, and all other misappropriation or taking advantage of the public funds. Or sometimes the unwarranted influence by one person to the public officer in order to gain an unwarranted benefit. Ayan, may mga ganyan sa Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act natin. I hope that we'll have a special lecture so that you'll be also familiarized with our Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act. Okay, now how about asset misappropriation? Yung asset misappropriation na yan, marami yan. Again, pag sinabi mo asset misappropriation, kinukuha, there's an unlawful taking of the asset. Misappropriate. It's either they have appropriated it or sold it and then benefited from it. Later we'll discuss. And also we have financial statement fraud. When you say financial statement fraud, it is fraud in the financial statement. How? Through overstatement or understatement of the asset accounts, liability or equity accounts, or non-recording or emission or double recording, or intentional transposition, transplacement error in order to benefit from the misstatement. So those are the three kinds of occupational fraud, di ba? That's the fraud 3. Fraud 3. Tatlo yan. Fraud 3 na puno, ha? Fraud 3. Pero 3 din naman sila. So, kayo na bahala. Fraud 3 or fraud 3. Okay. Anyway, asset misappropriation. Ayan, medyo nakikita na din ninyo kahit papaano. Diba? We have discussed. Sabi kasi ni ACFE, Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, ito daw yung mga usual na pinaperform. Ito hindi lang nila hinulaan yan. Based on their study class, these are the acts that are committed by the fraud perpetrators in different entities with respect to or with regard to asset misappropriation. O pag cash naman ang asset na affected, ano bang yung mga usual? Theft of cash on hand, theft of cash receipts, we have fraudulent disbursements. Pag theft of cash on hand, kung ano yung mga accountable na funds na hawak ni officer, kinukuha niya. Ano ba yung mga cash receipts? Yung hindi naman pinaubaya sa'yo. Yung usual kasi pag theft of cash on hand, yung sa petty cash fund, kasi andyan na talaga yung fund. Pag theft of cash receipts, you are accountable in receiving cash. Yung mga agents na nagre-receive ng cash for collection, yan, they steal it or they take it unlawfully. What are the examples? Scheming. Saan? Sa sales, sa receivables, and sa different refunds. Pag sa sales, there is unrecorded sales. Anong ginagawa? May sales sana pero hindi nire-record. So, yung pera doon, nabayad sana sa sales, di binulsa na. O di kaya, sige, nirecord nga. Pero in-understate naman, hindi lahat nirecord. Yung kakulangan doon, di binulsa na rin niya. Diba? What else? How about receivables? Write-off schemes. Kunwari, hindi na daw makukolekta. Kunwari, write-off na. Uncollectible account na. Or bad debt na. So, ni-write-off. Yun pala, siya ang nagkolekta. O di, nabulsa na naman. Lapping schemes. And unconcealed. Ano pa? Ito mga refunds. Pag nag-refund yung customer, hindi dineclare na may refund. Yun pala, kinuha na lang. Kasi hindi naman din alam ni company, may refund pala. Okay? Now, how about the fraudulent disbursements? Kunwari, meron daw mga expenses na kailangan bayaran. Yun pala, these are all made up, manufactured, and fabricated. There are billing schemes. Kunwari, may mga scheme na meron palang dapat bayaran. Ano itong Shell Company? Hindi yan Shell Company na Shell, ha? Hindi yan yung petroleum company, ha? Ibig sabihin lang ng Shell Company, there is a company that is used as a shelter. It is a dummy company just to be used in order to bill somebody. Or somebody will build the company or a company will build the company. Yun pala yung company na yun. Ang gulo, no? A company will build a company. Another company, which is a shell company, dummy company, will build our company. Sasabihin, company, may babayaran ka sa amin. Yun pala, hindi naman totoo yun, yung disbursement na yun. So, the payment for that bill will be taken by the person who committed the fraud. Non-accomplice vendor, personal purchases, and payroll schemes, ghost employee, falsified wages, commission schemes. Yung mga payroll schemes, may mga ghost employee. Yung mga sa payroll, dumadami yung mga empleyado, tapos sinusweldohan ako, may mga ganun. So, kayo class, you should be careful. In the future, when you become internal auditors or external auditors, you must be keen in observing and determining whether there are fraud within the company. Huh? Remember that, ha? Dapat hindi kayo ang nagpe-perform or perpetrate ng fraud. Dapat kayo ang nag-detect ng fraud. What else? Expense reimbursement schemes. Mischaracterized expenses, overstated. Nako, eto, uso yan class ha. Yung multiple reimbursement at saka yung mga ghost reimbursement. Anong ginagawa? Pag, kunwari, lumabas ka with your friends, kumain kayo. Ano mga usong ginagawa dyan? Ma'am, pahingi po resibo, palagay po sa name ni company. Papare-impress ko po kasi. Pero sa totoo lang, kayong mga magkakaibigan ang kumain nun. O di kaya kayong mag-family, birthday mo, di ba? Lumabas kayo. Tapos, sabihin mo, bill, okay po, ito na po yung bayad. Pero ma'am, baka pwede pa resibo. Pangalan nyo na lang sa company para ma-reimburse ko. Oops! That is unethical. Although, it is small in value, but the compromise in your integrity is of such a big factor or big value. Yung pag-compromise mo sa integrity mo, class, it knows no value. Once you've compromised it, it is already a big factor. Hindi mo pwedeng sabihin, konti lang naman ang pina-reimburse ko, grabe naman. Masama na ba yun? Masama yun. Okay? About check and payment tampering, forged marker, forged endorsements, altered payee, authorized maker. Yan, mga check payment. When there are ghost payees, or there are really no disbursements, but there are checks which are issued to ghost persons, yung mga wala naman talagang dapat issuehan na cheque. Yan, gumagawa sila ng cheque. Tapos sa kanila ipapangalan, tapos i-encash nila, hindi nakuha na nila yung pera. What else? Registered disbursements, false voids, and false refunds. So there are pinapa-void yung mga iba na mga false voids, yung mga hindi naman dapat i-void. And then yung mga refund, kunwari i-refund. Paano ba yung mga pa-refund? Kunwari si customer, nagsabi siya na pinalabas lang na si customer daw ay magre-refund. So si company would issue an amount in favor of that customer asking for a refund. Yun pala, false yung refund na yun. Hindi man pala totoo. O di kaya false void, sasabihin ni customer, uy, pinapa-void na pala to. Di kaya nagkunwari ka na si customer ay nagpapa-void. Company, the customer is requesting to void this transaction. So we have to return their money. And then, yun pala, hindi naman totoo. Ikaw lang yung nagpapa-void. Okay, what else? Inventory and all other assets, misuse of inventory. Ano mga uso dyan, class? Yung mga papel, paper clip, mga office supplies ng company na inuuwi nila mami at saka daddy nyo. Joke lang. Ng mga nung mami ko din dati nung buhay pa siya. Nag-uuwi siya ng mga lapis. Tuwang-tuwa naman ako. Sabi niya, anak, galing yan sa office. Nako, nung naging accountant ako, naisip ko, mali pala yun, Kasi tuwang-tuwa tayo, may mga libre tayong goods. Yun pala, sa sobrang love nila sa atin, they are using the office supplies of the company in order to give us what we want. Yun pala, that is unethical. Again, regardless of the amount or value, if your integrity is compromised, that is already a big factor, a big issue. Okay? You should not compromise your integrity just because of a small value, or regardless of the value. Malaki man o maliit, you should not compromise. Okay. How about financial statement fraud? According to their studies, this illustration again is sourced from the ACFE's 2020 report to the nations. Okay? Now, what about financial statement fraud? The net worth or net income? Sometimes is overstated, or the net worth or net income is overstated. What are the factors? Timing differences, fictitious revenues. Ano man ginagawa? Kunwari may revenue ganito. Hindi naman pala totoo. Para lang, again, ano yung nakaraan na diniscuss natin? They are overstating their revenues in order to make it appear that the company is performing. Maybe because they have a motivation or an incentive or a reward that they're expecting to have. Okay? So that is the overstatement or understatement. What else? Concealment of liabilities and expenses. Improper asset valuation. Improper disclosures. Yung mga improper asset valuations, sometimes they increase the value of their assets, appreciation of value, or they change the value of their assets fraudulently in order for them to have a very beautiful financial position, in order for them to have a higher stocks or better or a marketable stock in the public. Ayan, they do it for that. Ano pa? Understatement naman, understated revenues or overstated liabilities and expenses. They overstate their liabilities and expenses for what? Maybe they want to justify their closure or liquidation. Kunwari, they want to defraud their creditors. So what are they going to do? They overstate their liabilities, making it appear na wala na silang assets to pay for the upcoming due liabilities. Gusto nilang takasan yung creditor, yun pala wala naman talagang liability, ayaw lang bayaran yun, pero gusto nilang sabihin na may pa-bankrupt na ho kami, hindi na po kami makakapagbayad magsasara na nga ho kami, sa totoo lang What is that? That is financial statement fraud or improper asset violation, improper disclosures. So there are different ways on how to perpetrate fraud talaga. But what again we are saying is that this is not a discussion on fraud in order for you to know how to commit it. This is an opener, an eye-opener for you in the future not to do the same, or for you in the future to be able to detect, to easily detect and report fraudulent acts that you have discovered. Okay? And again, as professional accountants of UST AMV College of Accountancy, of UST, you are supposed to be, or you are expected to be competent. And when I say competent, you are performing your acts in order for you to not commit a mistake or error, and for you not to commit fraud. You're competent globally, not only in the Philippines. So for you to become competent globally, and then you must not perform fraudulent acts. Okay? And corruption, ayan. Ito, from ACFE pa rin to. Corruption, conflicts of interest, purchasing schemes, in order to have commissions, diba? Mga kakilala mo. Sabi mo, oy pare, ikaw na lang magbenta dito sa company ko. Yung kikitain mo, hati na lang tayo. O, ikaw magbenta dito sa company ko, taasan mo ng konti. Yung tinaas ng value dyan sa pagbenta mo sa company ko, hati tayo. Ano pa? Yung mga sales schemes. O, yung mga kunwari, may sale sila. Hindi naman pala totoo. Hindi kaya bribery. Yung mga corruption of officers, diba? The giving money to the officers or giving gifts to the officers in order to receive unwarranted benefit. That is corruption. Please do not do it. Okay? That is a very detestable act and there is no glory on it. Corruption is very bad. Very detestable. Very disgusting. You should not make yourself an avenue of corruption. Remember, you have to uphold your integrity. Economic extortion, illegal gratuities, marami pang iba. And all the corruption. So, if we will have special lectures, we'll be able to discuss all the acts. Maraming acts kasi sa Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act. Ayun. Okay, so here, how occupational fraud is concealed. So, sa study nila ni ACFE, Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, there are different ways on how to conceal the fraud. So, ito yung babantayan nyo as professionals or as accountants in the future, in the practice. This is what you should take a look. Create fraudulent physical documents. So, anong ginagawa? Kunwari, meron silang dokumento. Yun pala, fabricated. Or they just made it up. Or manufactured na mga document. Yung mga nasa recto. Yan, ganyan. Usong-uso yan. In order to conceal the fraud. So, they make it appear na meron talagang transaction na nagawa when in truth and in fact, there is no transaction that has transpired. What else? They alter physical documents. May physical document naman. Meron naman talagang transaction na nangyari. Ano lang ginawa? Binago lang yung amount. Konting tweak lang. Oh, what is that? It's still fraud. It's all the same. It's different flavors, but same act. Same fraud. What else? Altered electronic documents or files. So, there is an alteration. Di ba kanina, fictitious. There is a fictitious document. Wala naman talaga, gumagawa lang ng dokumento. Ito naman, may dokumento naman, inalter lang, there is alteration. And lastly, created fraudulent electronic documents or file. O di ganun din, para din siyang creation of physical documents. Yung kanina kasi, physical documents, printed documents. Ito, created fraudulent documents na electronic. So, bakit konti lang ang gumagawa nito? Mas marami yung physical documents. Kasi parang may authority yung physical documents eh. Mas parang mukhang totoo. Unlike pag electronic documents kasi, there is that connotation na it might have really been altered or fabricated. And 12% of their study did not involve any attempts to conceal the fraud. But the highest way to conceal a fraud is that they have created fraudulent physical documents. So, yun yung mga babantayan nyo, sa dito in the future when you become practicing professionals or practicing accountants, remember to take a look at these documents. Examine them carefully. And think or carefully scrutinize the document, whether it is really original or there were alterations or it is fictitious or is it really existent. Okay? How about detection? Detection is an important concept in fraud investigation because the speed with which fraud is detected as well as the way it is detected can have a significant impact on the size of the fraud. Kapag kasi nadedetect yan, bababa ang mga fraud instances. Pag nadedetect pag nahuhuli, matatakot yung mga tao na gumawa ng kabalbalan or kabulastugan o kasamaan. Pag mataas ang detection rate, matatakot yung iba. So, yung fraud, bababa din. Pero, kung matagal ma-detect, di mas motivate yung mga perpetrators to perform fraud. It is also a key to fraud prevention because organizations can take steps to improve how they detect fraud, which in turn increases the staff's perception that fraud will be detected and might help deter future misconduct. Ayun. So, di ba? It will change the perception of the employees. Sasabihin lang, parang mahirap gumawa ng kalokohan dito, mahuhuli tayo. Ayoko na, wag na lang. So, it will change their perception that they will be detected and might help deter future misconduct. Our data revealed, the ACFES data revealed several notable trends relating how fraud is initially detected, when it is detected, and who detects it, all of which can help fraud examiners improve the effectiveness of fraud detection and prevention at their organizations. So, meron mga trend. Ano kaya ang paraan nila to detect fraud? Before that, we're going to read this. Initial detection of occupational fraud. The foundation to effective detection of occupational fraud is knowing the most common methods by which fraud is discovered. Ano ba yung mga common methods na nakaka-discover ng fraud? Despite the increasingly sophisticated fraud detection techniques available to organizations, tips were the most common way the occupational frauds were discovered in our study by a wide margin, as they have been in every one of our previous reports. So, sa mga previous reports pala or studies ni ACFE, tips ang pinaka pinaka ito yung pinaka-common na paraan na nakakapag-detect ng fraud. Ano ba ibig sabihin ng tips? Yung bang sumbong? Tips. Yung tip ba? Binigyan ka ng tip. Hindi ito yung tip sa restaurant or sa bar or sa hotel, ha? Ito yung tip na may nagsumbong, may nagsabi na, uy, gumagawa si ng ganito, ng fraud. Uy, nakita ko si Mr. X kumuha ng pera dun sa fund. O si Mr. ganito nag-perform ng fraudulent act. Yan ang tip. Therefore, anong sabi dito? Processes to cultivate and thoroughly evaluate tips should be a priority for fraud examiners. So, mahalaga ang tips. Kaya kayo in the future, when you become professional accountants, practicing accountants, when you have noticed something, or when you have seen a fraudulent act and you're certain of it, or even if you're not certain of it yet, report it immediately to the authorized persons or to your immediate supervisor, except kung yung immediate supervisor mo yung nagperpetrate ng fraud, diba? Pero kung hindi naman siya nagperpetrate ng fraud, sumbong mo agad sa kanya or sabihin mo agad sa kanya so that there would be actions toward actual detection or toward deterrence of the act. The more na sinasabi mo agad, mas madali kasing mahuli o magawa ng paraan para hindi na lumala ang effects. Okay? So remember ha, tips. Kaya kayo, huwag kayong mahiya, huwag kayong matatakot. You should be brave. You should be resilient. You should not be coward. You should be whistleblowers. So dapat talaga sabihin agad pag may nakita kayong mali. In that way, you will help the company to discover the fraud. Huwag kayong mahiya, huwag kayong matatakot that they will avenge on you or retaliate on you. Your resolve to helping in detecting fraud should be higher than your fear of being detected, because you must have that genuine heart to help the company to improve, and you must have that hard heart for the company to excel in everything. So, kung gusto nyo mag-perform ang company nyo talaga, if you're really invested in the company, you want to help the company, help them by tipping. When say tipping, sabihin nyo kung may problema, kung may nakita kayong mali. Huwag nyo itatago, because that could affect the whole company and also the stakeholders and the public in general. Okay, what are the most common occupational fraud schemes in the Asia-Pacific region? So, they have studied the Asia-Pacific region and they have seen na ang mataas na common occupational fraud scheme ay corruption. So, dito sa Philippines siguro, yan, di ba? Corruption. Yung mga public officers, binabribe ng mga tao, di kaya nag-extort yung mga public officers from the public, and then they give gifts, very expensive gifts, in order to have unwarranted benefit. Yan, mataas. Kaya kayo in the future class, you should not perform any kind of corruptions. This is a very detestable act. In the Philippines right now, our president, he is telling everyone, we hope so, that it is really true, that he is fighting corruption. So, whether it is true or not, dapat ikaw sa sarili mo, you have that strong resolve to fight corruption, not only in the government, but also in your company. Ano ba? Yung mga non-cash na fraud, expense reimbursements, yung mga reimbursements na hindi naman totoo, mga billing, binibill yung company, yun pala shelter company or shell company. Financial statement frauds, overstatement or understatement of financial statements just to make it appear that the company is performing or has good financial position. Cash on hand, the misappropriation of cash or embezzlement. Payroll, ghost employees. skimming, check and payment tampering, cash larceny. Ano pa to? How is occupational fraud initially detected in the Asia-Pacific region? Yan. Makikita nyo, number one is tip. Paano naman nalalaman itong mga common fraud schemes? Through tip, through reporting. Kaya in the future, in the next topic, we will take a look at the responsibilities of the accountants. And one of the responsibilities of the accountants is to report. So there is a reportorial requirement or reportorial duty. There's a duty to report at a higher level of management. Yung immediate supervisor or manager mo, dapat dun ka mag-report. Anything that you have seen which is wrong or unethical, there must be an accountability. You report it immediately so that they will take action. And then management review or internal audit. Yan, internal audit. Ang mga nag-internal audit usually ay accountants, and that is you. Now, if you want to become internal audit, the auditors within the company, within the organization, that is called internal audit. And they detect certain fraud in the company. So the accountants play a big role in detecting fraud. What else? Management review. So pag nire-review ni management ang mga work, tinitignan, meron silang monitoring, annual, semi-annual, or monthly monitoring, then they would be able to see or detect different fraud. And then meron din yan external audit. O yan. So si accountant na naman yan, di ba? External auditors are accountants. Or when we also have certified fraud examiners. Yan. So tayo as an accountant, we really play a big role in detecting fraud. But later, you will see na hindi naman talaga yun ang pinaka-purpose to detect fraud only. Of course, because that is a very high responsibility. But we play a big role through our conduct of tests or procedures, audit procedures. We help the company to discover fraud. But that is not our only intention or our only role, diba? Kumbaga, by performing different audit procedures, we help them discover or unfold the concealed fraud. What else? By accident daw, nahuli na lang bigla, ID controls, document examination, and confession. So, tip ang number one. Kaya dapat tayo as professional accountants, lalo tayo accountable for the finances of the company. We have big roles to play. We have the financial accountability. Dapat mag-report tayo anytime na may makita tayo na mali. And then, as an internal auditor or external auditor, we should be best or competent in our field so that when it comes to fraud detection, we can help the company in unfolding a concealed fraud. What anti-fraud controls are most common in the Asia-Pacific region, and what are the number of cases in the Asia-Pacific region? Ano ba yung mga anti-fraud controls? Ano ba yung mga controls para maiwasan ang fraud? So, number one, external audit of financial statements. So, tayo yan. No? Yan yung sinasabi ko na malaki ang role natin. Pag nag-external audit kasi ng financial statements, when you say external audit, the examination of the financial statements of the company is done by persons who are independent of the company. So, sa labas, kagaya ng firm, na mga accounting firm, hindi sila empleyado ni company. Si SGV, KPMG, Isla Lipana, Punong Bayan, Reyes Takandong, yung mga yan, independent sila. They are independent body. They are public accountants. What they do is that they audit externally. Hindi sila empleyado ng company, pero check nila they are being employed by this company to check independently whether their financial statements are fairly stated or not. And in determining whether the financial statements are fairly stated or not, sometimes they come across with different errors and fraudulent acts. So, sa pamamagitan ng pag-examine ng financial statements, bakit naging ganito, bakit naging ganyan, dun nadidiscover sa maraming pagkakataon ang mga fraud and errors. That's why, as a public account, certified public accountant, or as an accountant, we really play a big role. We help them unfold the concealed fraud. Ano pa? Yung code of conduct, yan, anti-fraud control yan. Pag sa company may code of conduct, then the perspectives or the conduct of the employees are controlled. There is a guide on how to perform and on how to do an act or to manifest themselves or to conduct themselves professionally. So, dapat may code of conduct. May sinusunod na behavioral guideline. Dahil kung walang code of conduct, walang sinusunod, bahala lahat, mas malaki ang chance na magkakaroon ng fraud. Ano pa? Internal Audit Department o accountant ulit yan. Diba? Pag Internal Audit Department, then yung mga internal auditors, they are independent examiners, also independent auditors sila. Except that, in contrast to external audit, these internal auditors are employed by the company. So, yung mga empleyado yan ni company. Pero si external auditor, hindi sila empleyado. But independent pa rin naman si internal auditor. Dependent in such a way na yung determination niya na fairly stated ba o hindi ang financial statements ay hindi naaapektuhan ni employer. So, meron siyang independent judgment, independent examination. Marami pa yan. Meron pa tayo dito management certification of financial statements, management review, external audit of internal controls. Kanina ang ino-audit lang yung financial statements, yung assets, liabilities, equity, yung financial position, balance sheet, income statement, the changes of owners in equity, the cash flows, and the notes to financial statements. Yun lang yung external audit of financial statements. Whereas, dito sa external audit of internal controls over financial reporting, ito naman yung audit of controls, whether the controls are effective or not. An example ng control, segregation of duties. Ano pa? Monthly reporting. Ano pa? Inventory count. Yan. Ano pa? Asset warehousing. Ano pa? Invoicing. Mga purchase order. Authorization. Yan, yung mga controls. So, in-audit nila kung yung mga controls ba na yun effective or not, or gumagana ba o hindi. May mga hotline, fraud training, and etc. and etc. So, these are the controls that is most common in the Asia-Pacific region. So, meron silang hotline, independent audit committee, fraud training for employees, fraud training for managers or executives, anti-fraud policy, employee support programs, dedicated fraud department function or team. They also have formal fraud risk assessments, proactive data monitoring or analysis, surprise audits, job rotation or mandatory vacation, rewards for whistleblowers. So, maganda din yung rewards for whistleblowers na para ma-motivate talaga na anytime na may mali, isumbong agad para ma-resolve at mapigilan ang mga harsh effects. About job rotations. Pag sinabi mo ng job rotation, maganda din yan para walang familiarity sa job. Kasi usually, doon kukultivate yung opportunity The opportunity kasi ikaw lang nag-handle ng department na to or ng bagay na to, alam mo na yung pasikot-sikot, ikaw lang nagbabantay, madali para sa'yo na mag-perpetrate ng fraud. Pero pag naka-job rotation, may iba't ibang tao naghahawak, mas madaling ma-detect yung fraud, mas mahirap din mag-perform ng fraud. Now, per country in the Asia-Pacific regions, ang number of cases of fraud, saan ang pinakamataas? Number 1, Indonesia. Nasaan si Philippines? Naku, mataas din. 24. So, 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 4 tayo sa Asia-Pacific region. The highest number of fraud cases. Should we be proud of this or not? Of course not. Diba? That's why we are here, the accountants from the UST AMV College of Accountancy. We are here to make a difference. We must be different. We must be set aside from all the other accountants or financial people in the Philippines. We are to make the difference that we will become honest and full of integrity professional accountants. Okay? So yan yung way. That is the way that we can make a difference. We should not become like them. We should always perform our job with full integrity, full honesty, performing only what should be done, and presenting only the proper amounts and proper account in the financial statement. And lastly, how does the perpetrator's level of authority relate to occupational fraud in the Asia-Pacific region? Sa Asia-Pacific region daw, ang pinakamalaking cases, ang gumagawa daw ay si employee. Next, si manager. And lastly, si owner or executive. So, mas marami ang mga perpetrators sa class ni employee. Bakit? Sila kasi yung usual na on hand. Sila yung accountable. Di ba pag mga empleyado, sila yung nakatapat sa ganitong fund, sila yung gagawa ng recording, sila yung magsi-safe keep ng assets, employees yan. Yung mga managers kasi, they only manage their people, manage the resources, they supervise, medyo malayo ang access nila. Unlike pag employee, mataas yung access. Kaya, mas malaki din ang chance na sila ang perpetrate ng fraud. Mas makonti palalo yung owner or executive, because the owners or executives are high-level employees or high-level management. So, they do not have easy access to these assets. So, magtataka yung mga employees or managers, bakit nagiging hands-on si sir or si ma'am? Whereas dapat sila ay nasa reportorial level lang. Bakit kaya? Baka may something. So, yun. Magiging suspicious. Kaya konti lang talaga ang gumagawa sa owner or executive ng fraud. And of course, di ba pag owner or executive ka, you already have a stake to the company. So, you have that feeling na, I will not do this to my company because I'm becoming part of it. It's like, I'm the company. Diba? The owner or executive. Kasi it would be like, you're stealing from your own pocket. Kasi ikaw na yan owner ka or executive Bakit ka pa magpo-fraud? Diba? Unless meron ka talagang benefit. Bakit ka pag fraud, dadayain mo yung sarili mo? Sa'yo na nga yan. Unless, the fraud is to affect third persons or fraudulent or defrauding creditors. Yan. Kung ang gusto mo i-defraud, yung creditors mo, possible yan. Owner, executive ang magiging fraudulent perpetrators. Ano pa? If they want to defraud their stockholders or the third persons, but not themselves, diba? They do not do that for their own selves. But take a look at the loss. Kahit maliit, kahit konti lang sa owner or executive, mas malaki yung amount na involved. Ba? Pagka management din, mas maliit ng konti. At yung employee, pinaka-konti yung nakukuha nila. Kasi pag employee, pa konti-konti lang yan. Mataas yung access nila, pero pa konti-konti lang nananakaw or nadidefraud nila or na misappropriate nila. Manager, mataas ng konti, pero mas mataas sa owner. So, although the cases are low with respect to owner executive, dahil konti lang din naman din sila, mataas naman yung amount na affected. Yung loss na effect ng fraudulent act. So, ayun din, class, no? Percent of cases, maliit din siguro kaya sa owner or executive because the owners or executives are just few in numbers. Pero when compared or contrasted to the employees, mas marami kasi si employee, kaya marami din ang number of cases. Ayan. So this is our discussion with respect to error, fraud, triangle, fraud diamond, and the 2020 report to nations of the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. So this is the end, and now we're going to discuss in the next topic the responsibility of the accountants. So as professional accountants, ano nga ba ang responsibility natin in the detection of fraud or error, or what are our responsibilities with respect to that? So Thank you very much for listening and see you on to our next lecture.